What happens when the problem is not pain, not heat, not instability, but slowing at the level of the whole system? You sleep more, you move less, your metabolic drive drops, your endocrine rhythm feels sluggish, weight rises more easily, reproductive drive reduces. The body seems to conserve rather than mobilize. And your direction in life starts to feel fixed, heavy, and resistant to change. This is where ninth house Kapha becomes much deeper than it first appears. Because the ninth house is not only about faith, philosophy, higher learning, destiny, and long-term direction. In body mapping, it also governs the hips, thighs, tailbone area, sacral region, sciatic nerves, and pituitary-linked hormonal functions. So when Kapha rises here, it does not only create heaviness in the hips and thighs, it can also create slowness in the body's motivational chemistry, reduced mobilization, excess conservation, and a rhythm that prefers storing over activating. And that is the key teaching of this slide. Because Kapha is heavy, slow, moist, cold, and cohesive. When Kapha accumulates, the system does not first become chaotic. It becomes sticky. It becomes slow to initiate, slow to shift, slow to heat up, slow to respond, and slow to release what it is holding. That is exactly why this hormonal expression is described as low metabolic drive, sluggish endocrine rhythm, weight gain tendencies, reduced reproductive drive, and excess sleep cycles. Then the slide gives the sentence that captures the whole pattern. The system conserves instead of mobilizes. That is not just a hormonal statement, that is a life statement. Because once the system becomes conservation dominant, everything changes. Energy is preserved but not activated. Rest is available but becomes excessive. Stability is present but hardens into inertia. Direction exists but does not move. This is classic Kapha excess. Now let us reason through the planets shown here. Moon, Jupiter, and Venus. This is a deeply coherent Kapha cluster. And for this particular slide, each planet helps us understand why the slowing does not remain only physical. It becomes hormonal, emotional, and directional. Let us begin with Jupiter. Jupiter is the most clearly Kapha planet in the group. Jupiter governs growth, accumulation, fat, fullness, sweetness, and expansion. In the body, Jupiter can support nourishment and development when balanced. But when excessive, Jupiter can tilt the system toward overstorage, overbuilding, density, weight gain, and reduced metabolic sharpness. So when Jupiter influences the ninth house field, especially through pituitary-linked regulation, I begin to think of slowed mobilization, easier accumulation, a body that prefers to store rather than burn, and a tendency toward heaviness in both tissue and rhythm. Jupiter in excess does not rush. It settles, it broadens, it preserves. And when that becomes too strong, the person may feel like the system is always leaning toward maintenance, never enough toward activation. Now bring in Moon. Moon governs fluids, emotions, food, rest, receptivity, and the body's cyclical experience of comfort and safety. In a Kapha heavy field, Moon can amplify sleepiness, reduced outward drive, fluidic retention, emotional passivity, and a preference for staying within familiar rhythms. Moon matters a lot here because hormonal slowing is not only biochemical in lived experience, it becomes experiential. The person may say, I do not feel pushed to move. I want more sleep. My energy is low but not chaotic. I feel comfortable being still. I do not feel urgency. That is Moon translating Kapha into subjective life. And then comes Venus. Venus brings Kapha Vata themes and governs comfort, pleasure, lubrication, reproductive tissues, pelvis, bodily ease, and the impulse towards softness and enjoyment. In this specific Kapha hormonal pattern, Venus becomes especially important because the slide includes reduced reproductive drive and sluggish endocrine rhythm. Venus helps explain why the system may become less mobilized not only in movement but also in desire, vitality, and relational activation. Venus here can say, the system wants ease more than pursuit. It wants comfort more than activation. It wants continuity more than stimulation. And when that combines with Jupiter's accumulation and Moon's passivity, the whole organism can shift toward a deep Kapha signature: preserve, store, rest, remain, repeat. Now, this is where the ninth house meaning becomes very important, because the ninth house governs higher direction, worldview, faith, long-term purpose, and how a person grows through meaning. So when Kapha accumulates here, the problem is not always confusion, as with Vata, or overheated conviction, as with Pitta. The problem can be fixed direction, not absent direction, fixed direction. The person may continue on a path, but without enough adaptability. They may remain loyal to a worldview, but without enough inquiry. They may keep moving in the same philosophical groove, but with less aliveness, less revision, less openness to growth. That is why the slide's overall summary is so strong. Heavy hips, slow movement, rigid traditional thinking, and sluggish hormonal rhythm. Direction becomes fixed and resistant to growth. That sentence contains the entire logic. The hips become heavy, movement becomes slow, hormonal rhythm becomes sluggish, thought becomes traditional in a rigid way, direction becomes fixed. This is not coincidence. It is Kapha coherence. The body says, I conserve. The hormones say, I slow. The psyche says, I stay with what is known. The life direction says, I resist changing course. And that is the deeper teaching here. Because when Kapha dominates the ninth house, growth itself can become difficult, not because the person lacks values, but because the whole system is organized around preservation. And preservation is useful until it starts blocking evolution. This is where healers and astrology students need to be very precise. Do not just say Kapha in the ninth gives heaviness. Go deeper. Ask, is the body mobilizing enough or conserving too much? Is the endocrine rhythm slow because of depletion or because of excess Kapha storage and inertia? Is the person sleeping restoratively or excessively? Is the lowered drive a nervous shutdown pattern or a Kapha dominant slowing pattern? Is the worldview stable or rigid? Is the direction grounded or resistant to growth? Is tradition alive or simply fixed? That is real interpretation. And this third Kapha version is clearly different from the previous two. The first emphasized physical heaviness, stiffness, fluid retention, dull sacral ache, sluggish gait, and slow recovery. The second emphasized dull nerve conduction, pressure-type discomfort, resistant movement, emotional dependence on belief, and fixed philosophy. This third version emphasizes pituitary slowing, low metabolic drive, sluggish endocrine rhythm, weight gain tendencies, reduced reproductive drive, excess sleep, and a life pattern that conserves instead of mobilizes. That is a distinct layer. So when you read this pattern, see the whole field. Jupiter expands and stores. Moon settles, retains, and softens into passivity. Venus seeks ease, comfort, and lowered activation. And in the ninth house, that can manifest as heavy hips, slow movement, easier weight gain, excess sleep, reduced reproductive drive, sluggish endocrine rhythm, fixed traditional thinking, and a direction in life that becomes resistant to growth because the system is conserving rather than mobilizing. That is rigorous interpretation. The hidden lesson here is simple but powerful. Kapha excess does not always look sick at first. Sometimes it looks calm, sometimes it looks stable, sometimes it looks loyal, sometimes it looks restful. But if the system has lost its ability to mobilize, then what looks stable may actually be stalled. That is the real ninth house Kapha signature in this expression. The ninth house is meant to guide a person toward meaningful growth. But when Kapha slows it too much, growth becomes conservation, direction becomes habit, and purpose becomes too settled to stay alive. That is when the body, the hormones, and the worldview all begin saying the same thing. I do not want to move. If this kind of deep Jyotish Ayurveda reasoning helps you read charts with more precision, Subscribe and stay with this series because this is exactly the kind of pattern recognition healers and astrology students need to develop. And if you want a personal reading on your own chart for health patterns, soul path, relationship dynamics, or life direction, you can book a consultation through astrovagmi.com. I will see you in the next one.